This tutorial explains how to consume ConnectPoint web services to create a booking. First, we'll go through the full sequence to create a consumer booking, and then we'll discuss how travel agent bookings differ from consumer bookings. You will be given endpoints for ConnectPoint like security, reservation, pricing, fulfillment, and so on. You'll also receive API credentials that contain the API username and password that authenticate you so you can consume ConnectPoint web services. If you're a travel agent user, you'll need a travel agent username and password and an IATA number. This information will be provided to you by the client. Before you start developing using ConnectPoint, we recommend that you download the open source SOAP UI tool and test it before you start your integration. First, you'll call the security token, which authenticates you and provides you with a token, and then you'll call the fare quote. In fare quote, there are two options available. One is fare quote, and the other is fare quote date range. Fare quote will provide you the ability to search for the exact date plus or minus 1 or 2 days. With fare quote date range, you can search for a week view or month view. In fare quote, you need to know the currency and the origin and destination you're planning to book. The fare quote detail object under fare quote details can be repeated for your outbound segment and your return segment. Here we have the outbound and return, and then here we have the return and outbound, which makes it a round-trip request. We also have various passenger type codes, or PTCs. 1 indicates an adult, 6 indicates a child, and 5 indicates an infant. In this example, we are requesting the same number of PTCs for the outbound and the return. If we look in the response, we'll see multiple flights returned. In this example, on July 20th, there are 2 flights and you can pick either one of those. Even though you're requesting fares for different passenger types, you only need to pick the fare ID for the adult passenger. You only need to pass one fare ID for the outbound segment and one for the return segment. You don't need to pass a fare ID for each passenger. You only need one for the adult. So if we wanted this flight for the outbound, we would pick fare ID 28. And for the return on July 25th, we could pick fare ID 76, since that's for passenger type 1. So 28 and 76 would be the 2 values to pass along to the summary request. In this example, however, we are passing fare ID values we found previously of 4 and 130 in the summary request. Once you get the fare quote, if you want to add special services to the booking, like a meal service or seats or any other offering you charge the customer for, you can retrieve those services during the Retrieve Service Quotes call. This call returns all the services that are available. In this example, we've created a round-trip request by passing in the logical flight ID for the outbound flight and the logical flight ID for the return. This will give us all the services that are offered on these 2 flights. Next, we have the Retrieve Seat Availability List call that gives you the seats that are available. This call only accepts one object. You can't pass multiple objects. So we have to pass the outbound logical flight ID and get the seat map for that flight, and then do the same for the return. Here you will have the seat codes for each seat. And here you will have the actual seat map. If we collapse the seat map, the seat assignments are shown here. For example, on this flight for this given date, no bookings have been made to consume these seats. But when a seat is consumed, it is exposed under the Seat Assignments object. If there are any exceptions, for example, if row 5 is blocked, that will appear under the seat exceptions. Now, let's look at the Get Summary Request. Get Summary Request is where you submit all the passenger demographic information and create the booking in the session. At this point, this response will not return your confirmation number because the call has not been committed to the database yet. Everything has happened only in the session ID. The security token needs to be passed for each subsequent step. Also, we recommend one security token for each functionality. The security token is typically valid for 35 minutes, but we recommend that you don't reuse the security token. After you create a booking or perform a commit or save reservation, you should retrieve another security token to perform another function. Every time you send a request, you will include the accessible carrier code. You will get this code from the client or your account manager or whoever provides you with the URL and credentials. The action type here is Get Summary. You'll also need to provide the carrier currency. This is the currency in which the reservation will be created. And in this example, we're keeping the display currency the same as the carrier currency. The IATA number is going to be empty in this example because this is a consumer booking. The language ID is 1, which stands for English. The rest of the elements you can leave as empty, even though we've passed this information here. Generally in ConnectPoint, for any ID field that is an integer value, whether the field is required or not, you must pass a minimum integer value. For example, the WBC ID is an ID field with an integer value, so you need to pass it in with a minimum integer value. This address and contact information is not going to be saved. When we originally created the schema, we designed it in a different way, but it's in the contract schema and we can't remove it or it will break the other existing consumers who are using our web service. So we have left this as is, and this address and information will not be consumed. Under the Passengers object, there is the Person element. In this example, we requested fares for 3 passengers, 1 adult, 1 child, and 1 infant. So we need to pass in 3 passengers. And here we have the first passenger, the second passenger, and the third passenger. The main passenger will be the adult passenger, which is identified by this PTC type. We'll discuss travels with person org ID when we talk about the infant passenger type later on in this tutorial. Here you can pass in all the information for the passenger, like address and contact fields. So instead of using this address and contact info, we collect the address and contact information for each passenger. So each person object will contain address and multiple contact info. For each contact type, you can provide an email address, mobile phone number, home phone number, and other values. The person org ID needs to be a unique negative value for each passenger in the booking. In this example, we have 3 passengers, so we're starting with some negative value, 2141. And our second passenger will have negative 2142, and our third passenger will have negative 2143. Here again, the extension, country code, area code, and phone number will not be saved. If you want to provide this information, you can enter it here in the contact field element. Our first passenger is the primary passenger, so the is primary passenger element should be true for the first passenger. And that's everything for the adult passenger. When we talk about the child passenger, the child will also be consuming a seat, so the travels with person org ID is going to remain the negative minimum integer value. The only difference between the adult and the child is going to be the PTC of 6. Remember, the adult has a person org ID of negative 2141 and the child has negative 2142. You can start with any negative number as long as each passenger has a unique value. Here we have to make is primary passenger false because the child is not the primary passenger. Is primary passenger can only be true for one passenger, and that passenger will be an adult unless a child is traveling alone. The third passenger in this example is an infant. We have the person org ID as negative 2143 and a PTC ID of 5, which represents an infant. Since the infant is going to be carried on the lap of the adult and is not going to consume a seat, we pass the person org ID of the adult in the Travels with Person org ID field for the infant. This associates the infant with the adult passenger. Here's another example. If you have 2 adults, 2 infants, and 1 child, you'll need to associate each infant with an adult. you would pass in a negative value in the person org ID field for each passenger. Then everyone will have the minimum integer value in the travels with person org ID field except the infants. Infant 1 will be carried on the lap of adult 1, so the travels with person org ID field for infant 1 is -1, which is the person org ID of the adult with whom they are traveling. Infant 2 will have -2 in the travels with person org ID field because infant 2 will be carried on the lap of adult 2. Once we commit the booking, the person org IDs will be created for everyone and they will have a positive value. The lap child ID for the infants will show the adults' person org IDs. Alright, we're done collecting the demographics for all 3 passengers, so now we have to pass the fare information of the outbound and the return. The primary passenger is -2141, so for my primary passenger for the outbound segment, we're passing in 4 as the fare ID. And for the return, we are passing in the fare ID of 130. And if we want to add a seat SSR, all the information that needs to be populated here can be found over here. So the code type is seat, the service ID is 62, and the category ID is 8. And we have the outbound flight logical flight ID, the date, and amount. All of this you can get from the service codes information and pass in here. Here we need to pass the person org ID for the passenger with whom the SSR will be associated. For this example, we're assigning the SSR to the adult passenger, so we enter -2141. And we have to provide the physical flight ID. And if we want to assign the actual seat, we can do that here. Let's look at the seat availability call. From the seat map, we see the seat charges, and for all the seats in rows 14 and 15, we have to pass in the SSR of SEAT. We are going to pass in seat 14. And we'll do the same for the return flight as well. We're just assigning the seat to the adult passenger right now, so we're entering -2141. And let's run it. This is the commit summary. Once you make the commit summary transaction, the booking will be created and you'll receive a confirmation number. One element to note is historic username. In the historic username, you can pass in the username of the security token if you are a consumer. If you're a travel agent, you can pass in the travel agent username. This allows the client to identify who created the booking. In this case, we passed in Naga, so the booking agent shows Naga. Here we see the logical flight ID for the outbound flight and the second logical flight ID for the return. If you have multiple physical flights, they will appear here under the details. In this case, we only have one physical flight that is being returned. If we look at the person org ID, we see that those are all positive values now. The adult passenger has a person org ID of 1630. And the infant has the lap child ID of 1630, which matches the person org ID of the adult that will be carrying the infant. At this point, we have successfully created a booking, and because we have not made a payment, we have a reservation balance due of $292. If you are a consumer and you're planning to use the payment gateway on your side, you can inject the payment onto our system through this call. If you are using another payment gateway to process payments, it's a different call, but the logic is the same. In this example, we are assuming an external gateway is being used that will redirect the confirmation number and balance. And once a successful response is received, then the payments will be injected into Radix. Here we are passing in the balance and the PNR. Under the full payment service is Insert External Processed Payment. Insert External Processed Payment is used to process a payment outside of our system that will be injected onto our system. We have the balance, base amount, payment amount, and original amount. All of them will have the same balance that we got from the commit summary response. If you want to mask the credit card number, you can do that too. You can pass in the credit card information details for the payment method. The payment method field is an enum for the accepted payment methods. For the currency in this example, the booking currency, reservation currency, and payment currency are the same, USD. When you receive the transaction from the gateway, you can pass the status of the transaction, whether the transaction is approved or rejected, and you can pass the authorization code, the payment reference, and the response message. You should be able to pass this information in after the redirect once you confirm the payment has been made. Here there is a separate person object. This information is the same as the information we are collecting for a person object here. We need to collect separate payer information for times when the passenger is not the payer. For these fields, you can pass in empty fields. You should now be able to create a successful Insert External Processed Payment. Let's run this. It ran and we got the reservation balance as 0. Now let's run the Save Reservation. We already committed the transaction here, and we are injecting the payment, so now we need to call Create PNR with an action type of Save Reservation. In the action type dropdown, we have Commit Summary and Save Reservation. Commit Summary is called the first time when you create a booking. Once we have created a booking and we have the confirmation number returned here, whenever we make any kind of modification to the booking, we need to call Save Reservation and pass the confirmation number here. This confirms that the booking has been successfully made and there is no reservation balance. If we look at the Payments node, it shows all the information about the payment that we just injected through the Insert External Processed Payment. Here we have put in a message with the auth code and other information that was passed into the request that will be returned back here. Now let's look at the seat SSR. Remember, we only performed a seat assignment for the adult passenger, and we assigned seat 14A on the outbound and the return. Here we see seat 14A under the seat assignment for the adult passenger. All right, this concludes the flow for the successful creation of a consumer booking. Now let's look at how to make a travel agent booking. When making a booking as a travel agent, you will be calling the travel agent login travel agent call, which is under the ConnectPoint.TravelAgents. You should check the logged in response to confirm that it's true. True means the travel agent user is logged into the system. If it's false, you need to stop the transaction because the travel agent user is not logged in, and you need to find out why the user is not able to log in before you proceed with any transactions. Travel agent users must also call Retrieve Agency Commission whether the client offers a commission or not. Another difference between the normal consumer flow and the travel agent flow is that you will be passing in the IATA number onto the fare quote request and subsequently to the summary request. If you don't pass the information in here, then this will fail, saying that your logged in IATA number does not match. Here you can see that we have logged in with IATA number 8001, and it shows you all this detail. Other than that, it is exactly the same call that we described in the consumer flow. And here you can see that we have successfully created the booking and we have a balance. Most of the travel agent users are set up as an agency portal with available funds, so you will usually use an invoice payment. So we're passing the balance and PNR, and we're calling the process PNR payment. This payment call is also the same, except that this is not an Insert External Processed Payment. When this is processed, it uses the invoice payment and adds a record to the AR receivables. The security token works the same as it does with a consumer booking. For the historic username for a travel agent, you can pass in the travel agent's username. The rest of this call is the same as what we described in the consumer flow except for the payment method. Since we're not using card payments, as a travel agent user, you'll be using the invoice payment method of INVC. In this example, the transaction status shows that the transaction is approved. If you have a balance, this call will be successful. If you don't have a balance, you will receive an error saying that there are insufficient funds to make the transaction. When the service is consumed, you will see a zero balance. And when we look at the Payments node, you can see the payment method we used. This is our agency, this is the amount we paid, and this is the payment method we used. For the travel agent flow, we didn't show making the service codes and seat availability calls. If you offer special services, you can call those after the fare quote the same way as in the consumer flow. This concludes the sequences that you need to call during the consumer flow and the travel agent flow.